episode of the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I am your host, Dr. Harbir Sayan. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. As always, I'm so grateful for all the support and all the listening, the viewing, the sharing and the liking. Everything that you do really helps the podcast grow. And in addition to that, I always ask, if you don't mind, please, a big favor right off the top, that if you get some value out of this conversation, please do share it. If you see a little snippet on Instagram or LinkedIn, please do share that with your friends. Let them know that we're having these conversations, because I think they're going to be impactful in our profession, in our industry, and help our industry grow. So I always appreciate all of that support. And my amazing guest today is Mr. Joe Sabel, who is the owner of Western Optical Supply. He's based in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Go Packers. He's been in the eye care industry since 2008, started with Essilor, moved over to the instrument side, and was heavily involved in Wallman and Lombard, and eventually, as I mentioned, became the owner of Western Optical Supply. He says that he has the heart of a teacher, which I love hearing, and has been really involved in creating CE content and educational content for the industry. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. Joe, we're gonna dive into a few different things, and including like entrepreneurship, because that's a big part of this conversation. The podcast in general. But we'll talk about how we can help streamline practices within optical stores and optometry clinics, how we can enhance patient satisfaction. There's gonna be so much great content in here. Joe, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate everything. I'm super excited about this, and appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, man. I find myself saying this a little too often, unfortunately, but it's been a long time. We've been trying to put this together for a while. If you listen just to the last few episodes of the podcast, I think I've said that at the beginning of every single episode. So you're not alone. And like I said offline, I appreciate your patience with me. But we're here and we're going to do it, and I'm excited. So if you don't mind, Joe, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of a self-introduction, and let's dive a little bit into that entrepreneurship conversation.
Sure. Yeah, great. Thanks again for having me. I've been in the industry since '08, and I just really fell in love immediately with the industry. I started selling Verilux up here in Wisconsin, and really fell in love with it. But an interesting thing where I learned hard way, I guess you'd say, is that I need experience to really be effective as a salesperson, as a promoter, etc. in the industry. And because one of my first calls I ever made was to my largest account, and it's like coming right out of training from Essilor. I go to my largest account. Of course, I'm excited. I go in to introduce myself to the new to the decision maker, and she looks at my car and she says, "You're not EBOC." I said, "No, in fact, I'm brand new to the industry. I'm hoping that I can learn from you guys." And she just looks at me, no emotion, hands me the card back, and says, "Well, don't come back until you are."
Wow.
I'm like, wow. Okay. Get into the car, a little rough walk there, and drive home, and etc. And but you know what? There was something that clicked as well, is that she was right. There's something to be said about having a good, solid knowledge base to be a resource for the eye care professionals out there. I'm not just moving products. It's not about that. I want to be a resource. That's what my heart is, and so forth. So what I do, I went out and got it. Separate note, we're actually hosting an ABO training at Western here that started last week. But yeah, that's what I did. I used that same instructor that I'm using right now, as a close personal friend of mine, Kathy Barrow, who's taught me, and I passed with flying colors, and came back to that account, and she was like, "Well, I didn't think you'd actually do that." But I'm like, you know what? That's what it comes down to it. You were right. She was right. I want to be a resource, and I want to be a value add. I'm not just about moving a box or selling a box and so forth. It really comes down to being a resource, because when the whole industry grows, or my customers grow, I know my business is going to grow. So I've had that mindset from day one, and it's been really my go-to. And now fast forward to 16, 17 years later now, that's the same mindset. So Getting that ABLC was an important thing. Ended up getting my speaker certification. You mentioned it earlier. I created a presentation that is CE approved, and I gave that talk. It was on electronic refraction all over the country for quite some time. So
That's great. That's amazing. That's quite a humbling lesson to learn right out the gate. Man,
yeah,
that could probably break somebody's spirit a little bit, I think. But good for you for taking that lesson and really putting into action. I would hope that that person was impressed with you when you went back after saying, "I got this certification."
yeah, that's a part probably should have finished the story with. She was very, very impressed and was a not only a friend, customer, mentor, all the above for a long time.
That's
That
amazing.
customer stayed with me from till today. Even.
You know, I something you said in there so important. Couple of things I actually just want to quickly touch on. One is the being the resource. You know, I always joke. I would used to well when I do presentations and stuff like that. I joke like I used to hide from my reps, like whether it was ophthalmic lens frame, contact lens, whatever, dry eye. You know, when they would come in the office, I would just tell my staff like, tell them I'm busy. You know,
Oh,
just
we
take them
we know.
apart.
We heard it all. Oh yeah,
Yeah. But now, like now I say I used to run from my reps, or I used to say I used to hide from my reps. Now I hug my reps. And I actually do actually built really good, strong relationships with many of them. And when they come in, it's a good handshake, or it's often a hug, to be honest with you. Because I know how much of a resource they are, not just can be, how much they are for my office and my business and my staff. So it's cool that you kind of go in with that. And the other thing you said, which something that I harp on a lot, and I think kind of people sort of like, you know, um, roll their eyes at maybe a little bit is what's good for the profession, what's good for the industry is good for each of us individuals as well. You know, if we do something that's overall going to support the profession and the industry, ultimately it's going to come back to us and we'll be better off for it, right? So kind of doing that greater
that's right.
good type of thing. So it's cool that you mentioned a few of those things right off the top, because a lot of that resonates with me personally, and I'm sure it does with a lot of people out there.
It's great. Yeah, I completely agree.
So let's talk about how do you go about buying an optical supply company?
Well, I'll tell you. You know, it kind of goes along a lot with what you're just talking about, though, being a resource. And that part of being a resource is just getting to know people and building relationships. And that's what I've done through my whole career in eye care. It's just really built long-term relationships. So basically, one of those relationships is a close personal friend of mine and mentor is Joe Cherry. He owns or used to own Cherry Optical. Now his son Adam does extremely, extremely well. Excuse me. Is a successful independent lab here in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and um, Joe uh, was reached out to by the uh, uh, now retired owner of Western Optical Supply about would Joe be interested in acquiring Western? Well,
Hmm.
he wasn't, but knew that I was could be a potential suitor and connected us two together. And the great thing about that was um, Joshua Freilich, the now retired owner, was he's very similar mindset as me. Really heart of a teacher, just a
Hmm.
innovating type mind, and really just did so much for the industry and loved giving back. And have really built a nice, great, successful business through it, through that mentality. The golden rule. Treating everybody the way you want to be treated. Similar
Hmm.
mindset as me. And so when I saw that and I met Joshua, I just fell in love with it. My wife
Hmm.
too. So we ended up buying. My wife Holly and I acquired Western at the beginning of the year. We closed together. And one of the reasons too that Joshua opted to sell to us was he wanted to see his legacy keep going. He had private equity offers, he had strategic offers come down the
Hmm.
pike, but most likely Western would have been absorbed or folded or some sort of thing like that. And Joshua built this over 50 years old solid brand and just did not want to see that go away. And
Hmm.
that's what I was able to offer to him. And we want to continue that legacy that he's built and hope
Yeah.
to be at least as good of a job that he's done for the industry.
Yeah, that's wonderful. There's a lot of private equity involvement in the industry. There has been for a while now. So we'll see that in a lot of companies, or optometry clinics even. There's many of them being rolled up into to these different private equity
Yeah,
organizations and outfits. But there's a lot of independents out there who's just like the previous owner there, who say, look, I spent all this time building this company, I want this to continue. And they know the value in that for the profession, not just for their own company and their own legacy, but for the
that's right.
profession. Having that independent presence is very, very important.
That's
So
right. Exactly.
So through this experience that you've had over the last 15 years, you started, as you said, kind of more ophthalmic side, and then you moved more over to the supply and the tools kind of side. This is some of the stuff we want to talk about. I don't talk a lot about like in the clinic or in the store, hands-on type stuff. Generally, it's a bit more, business development and entrepreneurship type conversations, a little bit of how we started. But I think it makes a lot of sense for us to have these conversations today, actually, you and I, since you've had so much experience in this space. So we wanted to talk a little bit about streamlining operations in a practice, and maximizing revenue and patient satisfaction, these types of really important topics.
Definitely.
So I'd love to start with the tool side, because to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of knowledge in this space. We have opticians in our practices who
Sure.
know infinitely more than I do. um, but for those who are out there who are listening, like how what kind of modern dispensing tools are there out there? How can we properly utilize these to improve the optical side of the business?
Sure. So starting kind of more on a higher level, it really comes down to providing a tremendous customer experience. And how do you do that? So one of the ways that we help educate our opticians and our opticals out there is to make sure that if a patient comes in with a frame that's broken, or really out of alignment, or something that's a major detriment, we don't want frame to necessarily have to be sent out. So many places you'll go into, and they don't know how to fix the frame, they don't, whatever it may be, and they just send it back out. So what happens to that customer? That customer is left waiting, without, potentially could be their only eyewear,
Mm,
for a week, 2 weeks, until that frame gets sent back. So we want to teach and educate on some of the different tools that we provide that can help them alleviate the need for doing that. So a spring hinge is a great thing. We have the spring hinge plier kit that we show step-by-step instructions on how to fix a spring hinge. So that thing pops off, you don't have to worry about. We can show you how to put them together and make sure that that frame is good as new, without
mm,
that customer having to wait and be without their very important eyewear for
yeah.
for a couple weeks or so on and so forth. So and then just think about that patient, then that experience, what that patient's could be good. That could be the third or fourth optical they've been to over the course of a decade or something, where they've just kind of went from one to another because they're all kind of the same. But just that impact of, wow, they were able to fix that. I didn't think there's any way they could do that. And then they go home and
Yeah.
tell their neighbors, they tell their friends or whatever that,
Right.
oh yeah, Dr. Cyan's office was able to fix this, major repair, which I thought it was going to be, and I was going to be without my eyewear for so long. So there's that component, but there's another piece as well about making sure that a tool is not a tool. Not necessarily, they're not all the same. It's about the
Mm,
quality, it's about design of them.
mm,
There could be just subtle angles, subtle tweaks in certain things that we've added to our tools through feedback from our opticians, which we want to know, and hear. And if we have to tweak designs, we will tweak designs
mm.
to make their jobs easier, to make a bend in a frame easier, to make it more precise. So again, makes their job easier, makes their job more efficient, and most importantly, provides a great customer experience, which is ultimately our goal. So
I
all of
see.
that's going to do is, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. Please finish.
I was just going to say all of that's going to enhance optical revenues, capture rates, and so forth. So you still see it in the numbers, of course, when it's all said and done. It's not just the intangible side of it.
Right, absolutely. So, sorry, what I was going to say, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you know, again, the optical, what happens in the lab, like we obviously talk to our opticians, and but we know that they're trained and licensed, so that we know they're coming in with the skills. So we heavily rely on them to have that. But if I was going to make this sort of relatable or parallel to something as in more specific to just optometry for a second, a lot of what you said resonated with like dry eye treatments, for example. Offering um, the care that other offices, because we hear it a lot. I've been to 3 4 different offices and nobody's been able to help me with this problem. So I'm thinking on the
Right.
medical side, maybe we offer a treatment that somebody else doesn't offer. But then when you went to the tools, very interesting, because for example, people who are listening who do dry eye, they'll know, we do what we call meibomian gland expression, which is kind of squeezing on the eyelids a little to get some of the gunk out of the glands to unblock them. And there's different shaped and sized tools with different curves, and like one looks like a hockey stick, one looks like a paddle, different things like that. So a lot of it sounded a lot like what you're talking about when you're adjusting a frame, because one doctor might like the hockey stick looking one and maybe be able to get a better result with that versus a different tool, for a different doctor. So I think there's interesting parallels there. And especially as a business owner, I need to think about that in my optical, because I mean that is a big source of our revenue, and patient experiences, what happens in that lab. So I maybe need to pay a little more attention to that and try to bring in some of these more unique and specialized tools, right?
But and you're not alone. I mean, yeah, uh, tools are kind of they're not talked about as quite as often. They're not as sexy as certain things and so forth. But that's what kind of the mentality that I'm trying to change. That's is
Mm,
you can hear the passion in my voice, I think,
yeah.
and see that, yeah, if I put myself in that patient's shoes, what do I want to experience? That's why I keep stressing. I mean, I wear eyeglasses. I know the impact that that has on my vision and the importance of it. So, um, yeah, it's I to your point, I went being from the instrument side, I stressed all those types of things like you were talking about with dry eye, and now that I see it also on the tool side, I want to bring that messaging also to all the opticals out there and let them know that, yeah, you don't the tools are very, very important for your to enhance your patient experience.
Yeah, I think it all starts with the awareness part first, right? Like, so now we're having this conversation. So,
That's
myself,
right.
as you can see through this conversation, I am becoming aware that there are more advanced tools or better tools and things that are maybe. So, I need to talk to my opticians, like, what tools are you having trouble with? What can we upgrade? And it starts with that and having the conversation, and then contacting someone like yourself to say, okay, here's our issue. Like, how can you help me? Just like I would with my reps in dry eye or some other space. Do you guys, Joe, do you manufacture the tools yourself?
We do.
Oh,
Vast majority of everything is handmade here in Green Bay. I get some components and some pieces built internationally. Very, very high. Well, very, very strict on the quality of the components, but that's the bottom line. So I'm very, very
very cool.
picky on where it's coming from and what it's made of, and so we really go through a high quality or high vetting process before we decide to do something new.
That's excellent. Excellent. Well, I think a lot of our colleagues would be happy to know that too, right? Made in the USA, as they say. Who is that?
Yeah,
Springsteen?
exactly. Born in the USA, right there. Yep.
Born in the USA, that's what it is. Well, made in the USA, close enough. So you touched on the patient satisfaction thing. I think ultimately what everything we do is going to come down to that, right? Whether you're talking about an eye exam or specialty eye care services or optical services, you know, I'd love to talk about ways that, given your experience in the industry, you've seen that we can continue to enhance that patient experience and their satisfaction in the office, whether that's um, with the specific interactions that we have, personalizing wait times in the office or office flow, things like that that you might have. And one thing actually that I think that you've mentioned is about patient feedback, which is something that we kind of rely on people giving us Google reviews and that, but actively acquiring that patient feedback, I think, can be super powerful too. So, I'd love for us to kind of get in that kind of a conversation and in starting at whatever point that you'd like.
Sure. So, my experience when I started really grasping this was back in my Essilor days, and just the visual quality I got with certain products, enhancements. Just a lens isn't a lens, just like a tool isn't a tool, and so forth. I mean, the importance of anti-reflective and a good anti-reflective and what that can bring to you visually. So I started out just with that teaching, that mindset, just from experiencing myself. So it helped to be able to resonate, I think, with my customers, that they saw the passion that I had in the importance of those types of things, digitally ground lenses versus non, and so forth. I have personally have a high astigmatism. All of these things have affected my visual clarity so much more than what I was used to prior to me getting in the industry and experiencing some of these technologies. But the interesting thing was is and Dr. San, I don't want to put you under the bus here, but doctors, what I've found is that you think you're selling and you don't want to sell, so you don't want to talk about
Oh,
these
yeah.
things and so forth. And again, I'm not trying to paint it with a broad brush, but what I found
But
was that,
you're not
you know,
wrong.
okay, is that these are such crucial thing, that it's not that you're selling, it's you're educating, you're teaching, you're telling them about these things. And take the price, take all that stuff aside. Don't try to let that be the negator. Let the patient make the decision based off of what you've recommended, because you want to provide the best experience, best visual experience for that patient. So that kind of started my whole philosophy when it came into the industry, and I would teach a lot of eye care professionals that, and just the importance of taking the price of the eyewear aside and so forth, and just talk to them about the technology and what the enhancements that can be done to their visual experience, and let them make the decision from there. So all those types of things, and then what it does, obviously, to the impact on the bottom line. Of course, capture rates. Well, substantially seen improvement in capture rates in the independent eye care professional from following some of these things that I recommend, and so forth. So, but all of these things also just fell right into what I'm doing right now with the Western Optical Supply as well.
Yeah.
So and I don't want to harp on it again, but making sure that opticians really know how the tools work efficiently. I kid you not, yesterday, or not, excuse me, yesterday, it was last Friday, I had an email come in. Hey, I just got these tools. I don't know how they work. It was an email we got, and I directed them to our website. We have a YouTube site with instructional videos. Got her on the phone, walked through the videos step by step, and make sure that she was comfortable. She's like, "Oh wow, that's really amazing." And so I've never seen that before. And now she can take some of those adjustment teachings that we had done, and built on these videos. Watch them again if she gets needs a refresher, but um, making sure, again, those patients that are coming in that have those unique adjustment needs with those frames or repairs or whatever it may be, that they can make sure that they're they know how to adequately do it.
Yeah.
And so our YouTube videos that are right on are linked on our website. Whether you got our tools at Western or not, go check it out. At least see the videos, and making sure that you know the effective use of all these tools. There's so many different ones out there, and they have so many unique features that a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, a lot of people aren't quite sure what's used with what. So again,
That's a
we want to teach
the
them. We
YouTube
want to be
video
that
thing is
resource.
something that could, that could be, actually valuable from the optometry clinic side or the owner side of any even optical store or whatever it might be. A lot of times patients will have questions about, we might send them home with a certain treatment or recommend something in particular, and they might forget why or what it's about. But having that's great that you guys have the YouTube videos to direct your customers to go and kind of get that resource at home. So I think that's something that we can all easily leverage in our practices in our stores as well. Actually, is create YouTube videos based on the sort of common questions. If you have 10 or 12 or however many videos on YouTube, it's very easy to send a quick link to say here. And then if there's any further questions, of course, we can handle it in the store or whatever it might be. But I think it's a great point that you have that for. I wouldn't expect that at for a business like yours that you would have that for your customers, but that seems like super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it could be. I just look at it from my own experience. If I was told about some of the technology prior to 2008, I just wish I was told that of what I was going to experience visually that I do now that I did not back then. Those types of instructional things would help so much. Maybe a YouTube video that physically can show those experiences out and so forth.
Yeah. Um, One of the things you mentioned in there, which I mean you led with, which is actually so important, is optometrists generally have a problem with. I'm doing, if you're not watching, air quotes, selling, right? So quote unquote selling. Um, but it's obviously a big part of, I just had an episode recently with somebody named Pierre Bouret, who actually was at Essilor as well for many years, and he was kind of talking about this too. Is it's like we're like afraid of selling, we're afraid of calling our patient a customer, but so much of our business is a retail, is a huge part of it is retail, right? There's some of our colleagues who are purely medical, but that's a small portion of the percentage. So let's, if you could, given your experience in the industry, both again from ophthalmic to the instrument side, what suggestions would you have for somebody who is a little hesitant or not super confident in the selling of, how can we create that confidence around upselling? Again, these are sort of almost like taboo words, right? Upselling and and
Yeah.
other things like that, or like the second pair sales and things like that, where we can boost our revenue in the optical side. Any suggestions you might have on that side of things?
Yeah, I definitely take, the word selling, quote, I'm making air quotes too, maybe take that verbiage out of your mindset. Take that out and think of it as you're prescribing.
Mm,
You're prescribing and educating. Just talk to them about, ask them questions. Have a conversation with the patient. Hey, do you have issues at night with halos around lights or headlights or so forth? And is that, and, if they answer yes, well, talk to them about AR and what that could do. Does that,
mm,
ask them about,
mhm,
get some pain points going. But ultimately, it really comes down to, as a doctor, these are really, you are prescribed. This is a prescription. I mean, it's an RX, right? So think about it. It's no different than a medication you may be taking. This is
mm,
medication for
mm,
your eyes almost, and so
mhm,
on and so forth. So it's not necessarily about, take the word selling, take that, it's educating, it's asking questions, get them to understand and know what they're experiencing visually and the importance
mm,
of it, and dive into those pain points and per se, I might have a solution for you, and here's what it is, and here's what the benefits are going to be for you personally. Make it a personal conversation. I know you want to spend hours and hours with each patient. Sure, I'm not saying that, but it's a few simple questions that ultimately I think can substantially help and provide such a much higher level of customer experience. And that patient's going to think so differently of you that you're different than the other person that's just moving. Is it, hey, what's better, one or two? Great, here you
mhm.
go. Off you go. And here's your RX, and go to the optical, and the optician can help you pick out some frames.
Yeah.
Really?
S
You know,
somebody on the podcast a while back referred to that as spin and grin. Basically,
I
like
like
spin the dials and here's your prescription, right? That's what we
that. Yeah.
don't wanna do, spin and grin. That was a unique, phrase. I can't remember who said that now, but, we don't wanna be spinning and grinning. We wanna actually be educating and prescribing for sure. Um, Something actually I was asking a little earlier, and I wanted to kinda get into a bit more. We tend to, gauge our patient satisfaction based on Google reviews. Um, but like, do you feel like, I know I think there's some offices that do more of like an NPS score type of thing. But I don't know if you've ever seen anything like that, or do you have any suggestions on ways that we can maybe gather more feedback from patients just to get a better idea, more kind of real time idea of patient satisfaction with their engagement and experience?
Sure. Being a patient myself, so I'll just kind of relate it to what is important for me, and what I would do is my personal optometrist here in Green Bay is just awesome, and but
Let's give him a shout
they're
out.
just
Your optometrist in Green Bay.
modernize Dr. Samuels, modernize in Green Bay.
Great.
He's just awesome, but it started back. I'll tell you the story back. Um, Back in '08 it was when I first got in the industry, and it was actually for my wife. My wife was legally blind. It is legally blind in one eye. The
Oh,
other eye is fine, so she's legally blind in one eye. But throughout her whole life, she's seen multiple optometrists, or she was told so many different things and so forth. But nothing ever worked. But no one ever took a retinal photo of it. And
mm,
Dr. Samuels took a retinal photo of it, showed what was going on, and the optic nerve was actually kind of stretched. He said that actually happened at birth.
mm,
And so, it's just uncorrectable. It is what it is. It just happens to a small percentage of people. I'm sure you know about that stuff a lot more than me, but um, you know, just the impact of wow. It was an answer to a question she's had for 30 years at the time. And here's the answer. And so that experience. And so basically, but to kind of answer your question, she just tells everybody now. She
mm,
tells everybody. I tell everybody. My whole family now goes to it.
right.
We all go there because what a tremendous experience. And it's that word of mouth. I get to say it's kind of that organic grassroots concept. But when you're doing that higher level of experience, providing that, just the impact that's going to make, and what it can do, and what people will start to talk about.
Yeah,
And then just simple asking them, as
right.
call me, text me. Now in this day and age, you can call and text or whatever, and text out, hey, can you refer somebody here or whatever, and so yeah, word of mouth can be big, but follow up and just asking for a referral is big.
Yeah. I think that it sounds so simple. Well, it is actually, but it's I think we ignore or forget because it's so simple. We forget to do that. Just simply ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
Asking for feedback. I think these days we're lucky that we have technology like in our EMRs or other solutions out there that can be kind of added onto EMRs where they'll send a text message out and ask for a review or some feedback, and that kind of thing. So I think having that kind of those solutions is super helpful too, and they're fairly inexpensive, so it's worth having. Like I said, you may not want those people, you may not want everyone to go directly and leave you a Google review. I mean, hopefully where everybody would give us a 5-star review, but once in a while we always have those experiences where even though we did our best, the patient may be not satisfied for whatever reason. But it's always, if we can ask them and they can give us some feedback, we can learn from that. So I think that's
That's
really,
right.
really helpful. One thing I wanted to kind of talk about is from just overall business perspective. Doesn't have to be about optometry clinics and optical stores, but like given that you're a business owner, you've been involved in the industry, and um, you know as you said, you had a stake in some previous company and that kind of thing. I'd love to hear a little bit about like how now, maybe let's just go with now as a business owner, what type of things are you looking at analytics wise or just business wise, eyeball kind of wise, like just looking at your company and saying, here's how I know it's doing well or not doing well, here's how I make decisions. For another, speaking to me as a business owner, like if I were to take a step back from my business, what kind of things should I be looking at to know if it's doing well and how I can go about making some decisions? I know it's kind of a broad question, but I'm doing that on purpose because I would like to, and then we can get some kind of into some nitty gritty stuff as we go through that.
Sure. So I'm a huge numbers guy, and being a sales leader for so long, numbers are king. You gotta, how
Mm,
many calls to make, and all that's gonna build up to all the analytics tell the story. They tell the story of who's the top person, who's your top reps, who's people that are struggling. Then you got to determine from there, is it a will versus a skill issue and so forth. But
mm,
the numbers, there's no line in the numbers. So you've got to be looking at them regularly. So as a business owner, for me, I'm looking at my P&L weekly. I'm looking at, and that's for the month. And I'm looking at the, uh, sales revenue daily. I'm looking at, I have things broken down from okay, my month target is here. And so what does that mean per week? And what does that mean per day? And then what are my tactics that I'm going to get to hit those numbers on a per day basis?
Mm,
Um, so I have, X number of calls that I need to make, and I'm going to make uh, uh, that I'm going to spend, 2 hours a day I spend in sales activities. So that's reaching out, it's networking, it's connecting with the marketplace and ECPs and so forth. Um, basically what it needs to be is just you need to be looking at your balance sheets, your P&L on a regular basis. And if you're off from your targeted projection for the month, then you got some makeup to do. So how are you going to make that up? And
mm,
look at those tactics and really dive in. It's business owners. I'm sure you would agree. The distractions are real. It's emails. It's issue with an employee. It's
mm-hmm.
just fires, fires, fires all the time popping
All
up.
day.
But
Yeah.
but at some point, you've got to just to discipline yourself to say, okay, for an hour, I'm going to spend uninterrupted time doing X project. For me, and me as right now, as I'm trying to grow in a small business that we just acquired, it's spending that time in the sales activity and the marketing activity. What I'm kind of my bread and butter, what I'm really good and passionate about. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it's key though to get that uninterrupted. Keep keep this thing away. Put it
Yeah.
aside, turn it off. Mute it. I know
Yeah.
everybody, it's hard to do, but
Yeah.
you gotta do it. Just spend an
There's
hour
unlimited
plus.
distractions on our phones, unlimited.
Yep. Yep.
So absolutely put that away. And everything feels like it needs to be dealt with immediately, right? These days, whether it's this
Right.
email or it's that text message or staff concerns, whatever it is, and then the big picture stuff kind of gets put aside. And I was actually at a meeting recently and talking to some other optometrists, and it's one thing we go to the lecture, we sit in an hour lecture, but when we leave the lecture, when we're in the hallway or we're having lunch or even later having drinks, we're chatting. That's when we start to be able to have a bit more of that business conversation, and we're sort of showing each other like, oh, here's an app I use for my team, or here's an app I use for scheduling. Here's an app. Here's the this thing I use for billing or paying my staff, whatever. And it's stuff like that. And you're like, oh wow, that's cool. I need that and I need that, but I just got to find the time to actually implement this thing into my business. I got all these things written down, but finding the time to sit aside and like, okay, I got to enroll in this thing and sign up for that thing and actually put it into action.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But
But I
numbers
think,
are ultimately you've got to. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, just really dive in. Do not ignore the numbers in the financials, and really,
right, I wanted to
build
bring it back to that
build
as well.
something
Yeah,
off of there. Yeah, build
very
something
key.
off of that to tactically get to the where you want to be.
Got it. If I could, I know this is not exactly the conversation we're planning to have, but on the profit and loss stuff like that, for anything more you can share on that, like as far as how do you go about putting that together, or other information that somebody out there who's maybe not as well versed that you can share with that, or is that something that you got to kind of just learn through some other means?
Well, just because let's just say the person you doctors generally, you're great at what you do from your optometry side. The business side may not be your what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I'm not an accountant by any stretch, but um, you while that might be daunting, while it might be a little overwhelming, you've really got to dive in and understand those. So spend some time with it, get with an accountant for a half an hour or half a day even, and just
Mhm.
dive in and understand what each of these components are and why it's important. You don't need to be a CPA, utilize them to take care of the specifics down and, diving down and into the nitty gritty. But you need to understand from a high level standpoint on how things are shaping up as you go. Don't just put your head in the sand, or things are going to start to pile up and get overwhelming, and then could get yourself into a little bit of a mess. So I really, really highly recommend to make sure that if you're not comfortable with it, get with your accountant, get with somebody who can at least show you some of the basics, and get you to understand that, and maybe how this slight change could have a impact positively or negative on your bottom line,
Yeah.
um, is just important. So, but yeah, just don't put your head in the sand, I guess, is what it comes down to.
100%. 100. I think that that's such a is a very important message. And I would just echo what you said. If we're not comfortable with it, it's just simple. It's a matter of just speak to an expert and like an accountant in this case, and have them kind of give you some guidance. But ultimately, how you outlined it earlier is amazing. Like, you look at the P&L weekly, was it you said,
I
and
do.
then you have your right, but you're looking at sales numbers, and you have your monthly targets and all these things. Like, it does sound like a lot in the beginning. Maybe it is a lot in the beginning, but chipping away at it and just getting the habit of compiling these numbers and looking at them, and then all of a sudden it becomes almost like a game. How you're explaining it. You have
That's
your
right.
monthly target now. What is that weekly? What is that daily? What do I have to change to make this? But I know some of my friends are like, they geek out on that stuff. My eyes glaze over after a few minutes. I could be honest with you, Joe, but I'm trying.
Mine do too. Mine do too. I don't dive into the real detail stuff, but from a high level, I'm pretty good.
That's awesome. Joe, any other important messages you want to share with us? Anything else you want to help ECPs out there to help grow their businesses?
No, I just would just echo again what we talked about earlier is you're not selling, you're prescribing, you're educating. I'm sure you've heard it before, but just really try to get that mindset. As a patient myself, these are things that again would have resonated with me substantially, and so understand that. Take the dollar amounts, take the dollars and all that side, and just know that you're just helping your patients potentially see better. And this is our most important sense that we
Yeah,
have. And make sure that they know that they can enhance that sense to the best of that's possible out there with the technology that's available.
yeah, absolutely. I love that message. And there is amazing technology available now in so many ways that we can leverage. So we definitely should, try to do the best we can for our patients. So thanks again, Joe. Joe, how can people find you or get in touch with you? Let's say if they wanted to contact you, what websites or email addresses, where would you like them
Sure.
to go?
So thanks so much. Westernoptical.com for our Western Optical Supply is where our website is. And again, all of our tools that are listed there have YouTube videos linked there, instructional videos. So just if you need to know how to use something properly, go to the website and check it out. Otherwise, me directly, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can just look me up, Joe Sabel, Sabel, or email me at joe@westernoptical.com and be fine too.
Perfect. Love it. Great. It's been really good to get to know you over the last few months or so. You have been very, welcoming, kind, and open, and so I appreciate all of that, and I love the energy
Thank
and
you.
then the education that you brought to the podcast today. So I would encourage anybody out there who has questions, please do reach out to Joe. I think you'll be happy that you did, and I'm sure Joe will be happy to answer any of your questions. So thanks
Absolutely.
again, Joe, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Dr. Cyan. I appreciate everything. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Yep. Thanks everybody for listening and watching to the 2020 podcast, Canada's #1 optometry podcast. I'll see you guys in the next episode.